Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're taking a deep dive into something that might be a little bit concerning to some of you out there, and that's C. difficile, or as some people call it, C. diff. We're going to be looking at information straight from a gastroenterologist's website, the kind of stuff they give to their patients. So we can be sure we're dealing with reliable information here.
You know, it's so important, I think, to have good information when you're trying to understand something like C. diff. Um, it can be a little bit scary, but knowledge is power, as they say.
Absolutely. And think of it this way. Your gut is like this bustling city. You've got all these different bacteria living there, good and bad, and usually the good guys are in charge. They're keeping everything running smoothly, but then something like antibiotics come along.
It's kind of like a natural disaster hitting that city, right? The antibiotics can wipe out a lot of that good bacteria,
Mm.
and then that leaves space for troublemakers to take over, like C. diff.
And C. diff is no joke. This info says it's behind up to 25% of diarrhea cases after you take antibiotics.
Mhm.
So if you've had a round of antibiotics and things just aren't quite settled, I was pretty shocked to learn just how common this C. diff actually is.
Yeah, it's a lot more prevalent than people think.
Yeah, almost 500,000 people in the U.S. get infected with this every year.
Exactly. And it can cause a whole range of problems,
Yeah.
from mild diarrhea to something very serious called colitis,
Oh, yeah, I saw that in research.
which is basically inflammation of the colon.
It's worth thinking about.
Right. And what makes C. diff so nasty is that it produces this toxin. It's like it's throwing grenades around in your gut, basically, causing all this inflammation and damage to your colon.
Oh, that's a really vivid picture. And makes sense why people have such awful symptoms. Like this source mentions, sudden watery diarrhea, like sometimes 3 or more times a day with a really, really bad smell.
Yeah, those are the classic signs. But, in severe cases, it can be even worse. We're talking like painful cramps, constantly feeling like you need to go, sometimes even accidents. It can really impact your life.
It sounds miserable. And,
Yeah.
I always thought of C. diff as mainly a hospital problem.
Yeah.
But this info says there's a new, more aggressive strain going around now.
Yeah.
And it's even affecting people who haven't been to the hospital recently.
Yeah, that's right. And there are some people who need to be extra careful. Anyone over 65, people with weaker immune systems, folks with conditions like Crohn's disease, or people who are on medications that suppress their immune system.
So, okay, let's say you're having these symptoms. How do you know for sure it's C. diff?
Well, the most common way to diagnose it is with a stool test. They're basically checking to see if that C. diff toxin is present. And sometimes doctors will also do blood tests not to find C. diff itself, but to rule out other things and see how severe the infection might be.
That makes sense. And what about those super procedures? I know a lot of people get intimidated by that.
Yeah, there's one called a sigmoidoscopy where they use a tiny camera to look at your colon, but this source says it's not typically used for C. diff cases. They might do imaging like a CT scan to look for complications, though.
Got it. So let's say you do get diagnosed with C. diff.
Yeah.
What happens next? What's the treatment plan?
Well, the first thing is to stop taking the antibiotic that triggered the infection in the first place. But of course, only under your doctor's guidance.
All right, don't mess around with your meds without talking to your doctor.
Yeah.
But what about the symptoms?
Well, one of the biggest concerns is dehydration. It's really, really important to replace all those fluids and electrolytes that you're losing from diarrhea.
Hmm.
The source mentions things like Pedialyte juices, broths as good options.
And what about food? Anything specific that can help?
Well, you've probably heard of the brat diet, bananas, rice, applesauce toast. These foods are bland and they're easy on your digestive system, which is really what you need at this point.
Yeah, the brat diet, a classic. But hold on, so you're telling me the treatment for a bacterial infection caused by antibiotics is more antibiotics?
I know, right? It
Well,
seems a little
but-
counterintuitive. But there are specific antibiotics like difficile and vancomycin that target C. diff specifically, and they help to restore that balance of good bacteria in your gut.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So you take the antibiotics, you rehydrate, you stick to the brat diet,
Yeah.
and then you're home free,
Mm.
right?
Well, not always. C. diff can be a bit of a trickster. It actually has this really annoying habit of coming back. This source says about 15% of people end up having it come back within a couple of weeks, like 2 to 8 weeks.
Oh, that's so discouraging.
Oh,
So what happens if it does come back?
there are some things they can try. They might switch to a different antibiotic or try this thing called a tapered pulsed approach, where they gradually decrease the dosage of the antibiotics. There's also a medication called Zynplava that can help prevent it from coming back. And then
Wait,
there's...
I think I know where you're going with this. Is this the part where we talk about the poop?
That's right. Fecal microbiota transplant, or FMT.
FMT, the poop transplant.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
I know it sounds a little out there, but I've heard it can be really effective for those tough cases.
Yeah.
When C. diff just keeps coming back.
Yeah, it can be pretty amazing, actually. The idea is to take healthy bacteria from a donor stool and transplant it into the patient's colon. It's kind of like replanting a garden that's been overrun with weeds. You're bringing in this fresh, healthy soil to help the good plants flourish again.
So they're basically giving your gut like a fresh start with someone else's good bacteria. That's wild. And this source says it can actually be super successful even in those really severe cases.
Oh, absolutely. The source even mentions a study where FMT led to a 100% cure rate with multiple infusions in patients with severe recurrent C. diff.
Wow, 100%. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So is this something that's becoming more widely available?
It is. There's actually an FDA-approved prescription FMT now called Rebiota, and it's specifically designed for people who haven't responded well to antibiotics, and it can help prevent the infection from recurring.
That's fantastic news. So how is it administered?
It's a prepackaged suspension that's administered rectally.
Rectally. Well, hey, you got to do what you got to do, right? Whatever works. It's great that there are options out there to help people get rid of this thing.
Yeah.
What about this? I hear about a coop pill.
You're on the right track.
Yeah.
There is actually an oral capsule for recurrent C. diff now called VOWST. It was just approved this year. So no more enemas or colonoscopies. You just swallow these capsules for a few days.
Now, that's what I'm talking about. A poop pill you can swallow. That's incredible, the things they come up with these days.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears a bit. How contagious is C. diff? Should people be worried about spreading it to their family members?
It's definitely something to be aware of, C. Diff spreads through something called the fecal-oral route. So basically, it's spread through contact with contaminated feces. And the tricky thing is that C. diff forms these really tough spores that can hang around in the environment for a while.
Spores. So it's not just the bacteria itself, but these tough little packages that can survive outside the body.
Exactly. And here's a really interesting fact from the source. In one study, shoe bottoms actually had the highest percentage of C. diff spores.
Shoe bottoms. So we got to be careful about what we're tracking in on our shoes too.
It's a good reminder to be really diligent about cleaning, especially in the bathroom. And yeah, taking those shoes off at the door is probably a good idea too. Oh, and this is important. Hand sanitizer won't kill those spores. You really need good old-fashioned soap and water to get rid of them. And not just a quick rinse either. The source recommends scrubbing your hands for a full 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Got it. What about laundry?
Yeah.
Any special precautions there?
Yes, definitely. Washing clothes and bedding that might have come into contact with C. diff is really important. Use the hottest water setting on your washing machine and dry everything on high heat. Bleach-based cleaners are also very effective for cleaning surfaces.
Okay, so we've covered symptoms, diagnosis, treatment, even prevention. But what about recovery? What can someone expect once they've been through all of this?
Well, according to this source, you're considered recovered if your symptoms go away and the infection doesn't come back within 8 weeks. But there isn't really a test that can guarantee that C. diff is completely gone. It could actually still be present in your stool, even if it's not causing any problems.
So even after you've recovered, you could still potentially spread it to other people.
That's right. Which is why those good hygiene practices like thorough hand washing are so important even after you've recovered.
Wow, this is a lot to take in. C. diff can really turn your life upside down. Are there any long-term effects that people should be aware of?
Well, some people develop something called post-infectious IBS after having C. diff. And that can cause things like irregular bowel movements, bloating, nausea. It can take some time to resolve, but there are treatments that can help.
Okay. And what about probiotics? Do they help with the actual infection or with this post-infectious IBS?
Unfortunately, probiotics haven't been shown to be very effective during an active C. diff infection. However, they might be helpful for managing post-infectious IBS.
Good to know. We've covered so much ground today. Any final words of wisdom to help our listeners avoid this nasty bug?
I think the most important thing is to be really mindful of antibiotic use. Don't pressure your doctor for antibiotics if you have a viral infection like a cold or the flu. Antibiotics won't help in those cases, and they just increase your risk of getting C. diff. And if you do need to take antibiotics, make sure you follow your doctor's instructions very carefully and finish the entire course.
That's great advice. And if you've had C. diff before, definitely let your doctor know, as that can put you at higher risk for future infections. This has been such an informative deep dive. It's amazing to think that something as routine as taking antibiotics can sometimes have these really unexpected consequences. But being aware of the risks and knowing how to protect yourself can make all the difference.
Absolutely. And if you have any concerns at all, don't hesitate to talk to your doctor. They can give you personalized advice and help you make the best decisions for your health. It really is encouraging. There are scientists out there working hard on vaccines that could potentially protect people who are at high risk from getting C. diff in the first place. Just imagine, a shot that could prevent all this misery.
That would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
What about treatments? Are there any new treatments on the horizon?
Oh, absolutely. Researchers are exploring all sorts of new avenues, trying to find ways to target C. diff more precisely without disrupting the whole balance of the gut microbiome. Some of them are even looking into ways to neutralize that nasty toxin it produces.
So it sounds like there's hope for a future where C. diff is much less of a threat. That's pretty reassuring.
Definitely. And in the meantime, remember, knowledge is power. The more you understand about C. diff, what causes it, the symptoms, the treatment options, the more you can really take control of your own health.
That's a great point. We've learned so much today about this surprisingly common infection. It's kind of wild to think that something as routine as taking antibiotics can sometimes lead to these really unexpected consequences. But being aware of the risks and knowing how to protect yourself can make a huge difference.
Couldn't agree more. And hey, if you have any concerns at all, talk to your doctor. They can give you personalized advice and help you make the best decisions for your health.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of C. diff.